When I look at this model, there is no excuse not to buy this. It really is a great piece of engineering, and I'm really glad to be able to add it to my fleet. Hi there everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back, well, not to the loft. Well, actually later on we're going to be in the loft, but today it's a locomotive that I've really been looking forward to. In fact, we went to the official announcement of this model way back to pre-COVID days at the National Railway Museum. It is, of course, the South Eastern and Chatham Railway D Class, a long-awaited collaboration between Dapol and Rails. And don't forget as well that we've got an affiliate link down below that takes you to Rails, but do hurry because they are selling out quick and a lot of the different livery variations have already sold out. And we've also got a DCC fitting guide later in the video using the Rails Connect decoder, and we've got a link for those as well. But without further ado, I'm really excited to finally be taking a look at this model. I've waited so long. Come with me and let's see how it fares. I've actually been waiting for this for an awfully long time, and I was actually lucky enough to have been invited to the first announcement that this model was going to be coming out, that was held at the National Railway Museum in conjunction with Rails of Sheffield and Dapol and the NRM as well. And it was a great day, and I have to admit that when they announced that they were going to be making a model of this, I was really pleased.
Wainwright D Class.
Oh, brilliant. Because I think it's been something that's been requested by so many railway modelers for so long. It was so nice to see a manufacturer and a retailer listening to that and actually bringing it out. Now at the time it contained a couple of really innovative new ideas, although we've subsequently seen the tender drawbar appear on the GWR Mogul from Rails. But this is kind of where it was first announced. If you're interested in the DCC fitting guide, we're going to be doing a full guide with you of DCC fitting this model using the Rails Connect Next 18 decoder. And this should be a fairly straightforward affair, but I'm going to show you the full process for doing that. I'm also going to show you a bit of a world exclusive, because I'm also going to try fitting one of the all-new Zen Blue Plus Next 18 decoders from DCC Concepts. So you saw it here first, and this does of course also allow for the fitting of a solder-free plug-and-play stay alive should you choose to go down that route. But it'll be interesting to see just what space there is inside the front of this locomotive. Built for the South Eastern and Chatham Railway by Harry Wainwright, these were quite a sleek locomotive that ran on that network and performed sterlingly, and then passing on into Southern Railway ownership, and then latterly to the days of British Rail. But by then their days were numbered, and slowly they were withdrawn one by one, but luckily one of these was saved for the National Collection in the 1960s and survives to this day. And it's that example which forms the basis of the model that the National Railway Museum is selling, and that is of the preserved example. And I know that a few people online have been picking apart, for example, the lining on that model. But actually, photographs show that when the model was prepared for preservation in the 1960s by Ashford Works, that's just how they painted it. So the model that the National Railway Museum is selling is a perfect example of the locomotive as preserved. This particular model which I have chosen is the catalogue number 4S027-005, and that's the D Class in the South Eastern and Chatham Railway Grey, but with the scraped beading as number 726. Now, one of the reasons I've gone for this is because I actually really quite like this austerity livery that the South Eastern and Chatham Railway did, And I've been slowly building up a collection of all of the other versions of locomotives that have been released in this, including the P Class, the N Class, and I've also got the C Class in that livery, and now to join them is this D Class. The box itself comes in the rail style packaging. You can see their logo on there, and we've got this line drawing of the locomotive on the front. Looking over the box, there's no other information on here about the locomotive, but I'm going to slide it off. And this is one thing that Dapol do really well. We've seen it in particular with their O-gauge models. You get a very nice heavy duty cardboard outer case, which does protect the model really well and gives a good sense of quality. Now we've got a printed owner's manual here, and I'm just looking in here. We do get a short history of the D Class, designed by H. Wainwright at the turn of the century as one of the 3 standard class locomotives for the South Eastern and Chatham Railway. The elegant example of Edwardian engineering has seen many liveries from the eye-catching South Eastern and Chatham Railway lined green, which is available both from Rails of Sheffield and from the National Railway Museum, the wartime grey as seen here, southern olive green, and then also BR black. Now the BR black version, we've got some variants of that. I believe the southern livery as well, there's some variants too. They were actually built by a number of different companies: Ashford Works, the German fabricator Dubs and Company, and Stevenson and Co., and the Vulcan Foundry. A number were rebuilt into the D1 class, so there's a full history in there in brief. We also have a lot of other information about the sound options. If you've gone for the sound fitted versions, this locomotive is not the sound fitted one, and we've also got some details on what we need to do for DCC fitting, which we will come to towards the end of the video. It also includes full details on how to replace the driving wheels. Now the reason for this is because it comes with traction tyres as fitted in order to improve the haulage capacity. But I'm guessing because they probably got sick and tired of people moaning about this before the model had even appeared, they also include a second set of driving wheels without the traction tyres and the tool to enable you to change them. Now, I'm not normally a huge fan of traction tyres, it has to be said, but I've seen what they can do for a small 440 type locomotive, such as the Hornby Schools class is a good example where it also features traction tyres on one of the driving wheels, and as a result has an amazing haulage capacity without really compromising the electrical pickup from the track. Just getting this out now. This is actually quite tightly packed in this foam, so hopefully it will have survived its journey pretty well. So I'm just going to slide this out, and I can actually already see in there that one of the buffers has escaped. Now this is something that I've seen talked about online as well, and we will come to that. We've also got a spare set of traction tyres. Forgive the breeze from the fan, it is incredibly hot here whilst filming, so I've had to do that. So it's nice that we've got some spares there, and I'm sure other spares, should you need them, are available through Dapol. And then we've got that complete extra set of driving wheels with the gear, with the brass bearings, it looks like brass, plus a little tool there to actually change them. And I think we've also got a couple of spare grub screws as well, just in case the others ping off and disappear in changing them. And these wheels are fully finished, so quite an interesting, nice addition. We've also got what appears to be the front guard irons in there as well. So I'm just going to put that to one side. I will test fit these later on and just see what difference we can get in the haulage capacity. Then if we look to the other bag here, we've got some more user-fittable detail, and then we've got the tool that we need just there, which is for opening the smokebox door for when we come to DCC fit it. And let's take a look at the locomotive. Now it comes completely separate from its tender, and the unique innovative connection design allows it to do this very easily. Now looking to the back, I can see that the buffer has arrived out of the model, And when looking around online, I can see that this is something that has afflicted a number of models. So it should just be a push fit, but I can see there that there's absolutely no glue on these. It is just push fit, and in coming out it has flaked a small, let me just hold that up to the camera, there is a small element of the red paint has just flaked away as a result. Just going to push that back in. It is very, very loose, and in all honesty, I think I'm going to do what Dapol probably should have, which is put a very small dab of glue on there. Just checking the other buffer, you can see that that too is incredibly loose. They are just a push fit, but that is easily repairable. Now with the innovative drawbar assembly, you can just see it there. It does make it very, very easy to appreciate some of the other details on this, including the tender front. We've got a full plate there, which I don't want to force it because I have purchased this model myself, so I really don't want to break it. But it is fairly nicely well on there. The coal load is removable, revealing that actually these locomotives, the tender was mostly water tanks. You can see there the size of the tank, and not really a huge amount of space for coal. We've just got these extra rails at the side which would hold a load of coal, but with that flat tank top, it means that the fireman probably had to go up there and kind of shovel it forwards at various moments, probably whilst in a station. And there's not actually a huge coal carrying capacity. The front there is presented with completely whole, so you can add your own coal load. And the actual coal insert that it comes with is a reasonably snug fit, and presents it with actually quite a flat load of coal, but the moulding on there is reasonably good for representing the coal. The rest of the detail on here is really nicely done, and we've got a really nice effect with the fluting out of the tops of the tender sides. That is really nicely done. I also really like on the back we've got separately applied metal fitted handrails, grab rails, and that number there, the 726, if it's not an etched detail, it's certainly really cleverly done in the mould to give you a sense that it is a real metal plate. We've also got those separately applied lamp irons, and it really does come together to make a superb model. The livery is, as the name would suggest, grey and austere, but it's actually really nice to see on this locomotive, and as a livery I always think that this austere wartime grey does suit a lot of locomotives. It also means that we get a really good close look at the detail. So I'm looking there, and you can see that on the underframe of the tender it comes with all of the detail actually fitted, including the air tanks. Are they air tanks? I think they would be. I have a feeling that the Southeastern and Chatham may have also used air brakes rather than vacuum brakes, but certainly we've got the tanks for the braking system there slung between the wheels, and that's something that you don't often see on tender models, but actually because you can see that so well through the sides, it really does show up well. The tender wheels too, we've got the front faces finished in that grey. They are restricted in their turning. I can't spin them freely. They do turn, but there is a scraping noise which suggests to me that actually the pickups which are on the backs of all 6 wheels are providing quite a deal of resistance there, but we will put that to the test when we run this model. The rear coupling has a self-centering spring mechanism, which does mean that even down to very, very tight corners, this is going to go round just fine. And due to the decoder socket being in the locomotive, there doesn't actually appear to be any real need to go inside this, but I believe that it also does have provision for a second speaker in there if you want some extra sound if you go down the sound fitted route. Now I'm just going to put the tender to one side, And I'm going to turn to the locomotive itself. Now, if you're wondering, the scraped beading is quite literally what it says, and that brass coloured beading that you see there would originally have been painted over in this wartime austerity grey. They just slapped it all over the locomotive, but some of the crews actually carefully scraped the paint back off to reveal the brass underneath. So you've got this really quite eye-catching livery, which I think does improve the look dramatically. It does suggest that there is another livery option of producing these without the scraped back beading, so I do wonder if that may be forthcoming in the future. The extra level of detail on here though really is sublime. You can see on there the air pump really is a work of art with the extra pipe work, and then of course we also see that suggestion of motion between the frames, which is something that Dapol has done ever so well, and it does bring a lot to the model. We saw this on the Terrier, and in my view it's something that actually does bring a lot to the model. We saw it as well on the O-gauge 14XX and the panniers, and it really does look great. The actual safety valve cover up there is really highly polished. It does seem to have been metal coated, and it's shined up to an almost mirror finish. That really is nice, although in service that would very quickly dull down with the passage of steam. Trust me, because my father's steam traction engine does exactly that. One thing though, with the shininess of that safety valve bonnet, is that it does show up that the rest of the brass is painted rather than metal coated, and in some respects I like it personally, but I could see that some people might draw the comparison you see there with the spectacles in the front of the cab. It's the colour difference is quite marked there. The dome is nicely proportioned. The curves really are nice and accurate. Of course, they had the advantage that they had a real locomotive to scan. When I look to the front funnel there, I'm just looking very closely. I can just about see underneath an air gap. It feels like it has been glued in, but it's not quite seated all the way home. I can just see there underneath the funnel a slight air gap, which is a little bit disappointing, it has to be said, although from most viewing angles you'd probably not notice that. Looking at the front face, that has been captured really well, with the quite austere number on the front buffer beam. The front buffers, again, they're sprung just like the rear ones, but these do seem to be much more firmly in place and they're not coming out. We've got a coupling on the front of the locomotive in a NEM pocket, which is body coloured. And looking there, the actual pocket itself is moulded to the front bogie, which is a shame really, because even if you remove that coupling, you're going to still be left with that huge, great big chunk of plastic, which is a little bit of a shame given all of the other thoughtful additions on this locomotive. The front bogie itself is really nicely done, and I do like the look and feel of these heavy duty wheels. They've been captured perfectly. There is no toy-like look to any of these. The front bogie as well is centre sprung just like the prototype, which does really help this going through corners. The wheels there, we can see the traction tyres there fitted to the front. They're not really visible, so I suppose it's just a performance issue perhaps. I would personally, if this locomotive runs just fine, I would see no purpose in changing them myself. I think that Dapol have gone above and beyond providing that spare set, it has to be said. Looking really closely at the paint finish, I mean, we don't have a lot of livery here with the grey, but what I can see, there does appear to be a few stray splashes of the gold in there, which I'm sure will very carefully be removed. They're just something that's probably a little bit of oversplatter in the factory, but you'll just see it down there. I'll just have a look on the other side, see what we can see. The other side does seem to be clear of that, so I'm going to put that down as a one-off. I do really like the SE and CR nameplate on there, really nicely done. Although looking to underneath it, let me just try and focus in on there. There does appear to be ever so slightly, we've got a few little splatters there as well. Let me just see, will they rub off? No, going to have to do a little bit of work there, I think. Looking inside the cab, we have a wealth of detail, and this is another area where I like the fact that we can separate the tender and the locomotive, because it allows you to really just see how much detail is inside there. When we went to the launch of the announcement that this model was going to be made, we actually got to go in the cab of the preserved example at the NRM, and it'd be interesting to compare this back to the video footage that we took on that day to see just how close and accurate this is. But looking at that, there is a lot of attention to detail, all those separately fitted parts. That really is a work of art. The spectacles there as well, looking forward, the glazing in those really does look good. It's flush both front and back, and this is an area that we picked up on with the Terrier that Dapol do incredibly well. Those gauges and dials in there, I can just about make out that we do have something on them. It's just really hard to focus. You've got to remember, these are actually really quite tiny, but I can see that we've got needles and markings on those gauges. That really is nice. The rest of the model, we've got metal handrails all the way round. We've got the front brake hose is fitted, and then looking to the underside, the brake rigging comes fitted from the factory. And also looking up there, you can see the inside motion of this model. It is really nicely done, even if it doesn't move. The restrictions of model form mean that it would be grossly impractical to make that work and keep the model completely affordable, but it is so nice to see that representation in there, finished in the red, making it stand out. Looking down in there, we appear to have pickups from all four of the main driving wheels. Looking to the front bogie though, there's no pickups that I can see on there. Sanding pipes are quite springy. Not sure if they're plastic or metal, but they do certainly work quite nicely. And then you can see the other side of that mounting, and this has a degree of self-centering sprung motion as well. Now looking to put these together, it's just put them on a flat level surface, line them up and then push together, and you can feel it. It's actually quite easy. There's a click and those are now together really easily and with a great deal of movement there, and they are actually fairly close coupled, and that is another area that I do like. Turning it to its side, you can see how close they come together, but because of that mechanism in the drawbar, it does mean that it will still negotiate corners quite well. Now to get them apart, I'm just going to pull, and they just unclip. And this is actually a really great mechanism. I think that this, for me, is so far one of the standout technical details. And I think that if we see more of this on locomotives, it can only be a good thing. Because this drawbar actually has four metallic contacts on there. So that will give the pickups for these wheels to go through to the locomotive. But also I think we've also got the two speaker connections back out to the tender, and that of course then means that we've got a big space in that tank. It really is a huge space that you can put a very large speaker into, a well-designed speaker to really improve maybe the bass of the sound fitting on this locomotive. As I said before, this isn't a sound fitted locomotive. I have bought this with my own money, and I think it's £125 extra to get the sound fitted option over what I've paid for this, and this was £180 £89.99. So as you can imagine, it does transform it into quite a big ticket item. But having heard the sound option on the Rails Dapol Collaboration Terrier, I can only say that it probably, I am pretty certain, will be an absolutely exquisite sound fitting. On the rolling road on DC, the locomotive runs really, really well. In fact, actually, what's apparent is that the grip from those traction tyres is really quite severe, to the point where it was able to run itself off my rolling road quite readily. So you did have to keep a finger handy just to stop it from getting too exuberant. The tender actually doesn't need to be connected to the locomotive for the locomotive to run, and that does also make handling quite easy if you're wanting to run this up on a rolling road. It also means that you only need a 4-roller rolling road to be able to run this up, which does make it more economical for testing and maintenance. It's also interesting that on DC, the firebox glow just comes on with the power. It's not bright, but it is definitely there, and it will be interesting to see just how that works out when we run it on DCC. I'm actually going to turn now to the DCC fitting, because I'm going to need to do that before I actually run it on the main layout proper. And for this, we're recommending the Rails Connect DCC decoder. This is available from the same source as the model. In fact, we've got an affiliate link in the description box down below, not just for the D Class, but also for the appropriate decoder for fitting to it. I'm also going to be test fitting one of the all-new forthcoming Zen Blue Plus decoders of the Next 18 socket, and this also allows us to fit a Stay Alive with the unique solder-free plug-and-play interface should we choose. And this is of course a world first on this. These at the time of filming have not officially been released. They're just going through the packing process, so this is a full production model. From the detail pack that I showed you earlier, we need to get hold of this special tool, the purpose of which is more than anything to avoid scratching the paintwork. With this locomotive, the first thing to do is to separate locomotive and tender, and again it just shows how this innovative design allows that and just makes this process a whole lot easier. Looking to the front of the locomotive, we get the wedge-shaped end of this tool underneath the door hinges, and just very carefully lever that off and put that down safely to one side. Taking this door off actually is a really great opportunity to show you that smokebox dart that's separately fitted, and that hinge, which looks like it's a separately applied detail part, but it's actually just really nicely finished. This whole assembly is just push fit. There's no magnets or anything like that. And once we get inside the model, you can see that PCB daughter board in there with the speaker enclosure underneath. Now there's no speaker in there on this model, but then on top you can just see there's a little hole, and that little lug there just carefully slides in, and then the whole assembly very carefully just pulls forward, and we can remove the entire thing from the model. And we can see in there just the sort of space that is available. I'm just going to put the model down there. Now we've got the speaker enclosure already fitted. If you don't have the sound locomotive, then you can actually just put this out of the way for safekeeping to give yourself a little bit more space. And if you're going down the Stay Alive fitting option, you will need to do that. And in the sound fitted versions, it just comes with a very, very small speaker in there, which just has press contacts to these contacts on the board, so there's no need for soldering whatsoever. Just going to remove the blanking plate, just leave that out, put that to one side, and then we're going to go in for the Rails Connect Next 18 decoder. And that is just really, really simply push into place, and you'll feel it just click there. Probably not audible on the microphone, but that's now in place on the board, and it's just simply a case of making sure that that decoder again is uppermost. You'll see there's some grooves in there. Line the daughter board up with that, let it drop in, and then actually probably easiest, carefully push it back with your thumb. It will give you a little bit of resistance but not a huge amount, and you'll feel when it goes in home. And then it's just a case of adding in smoke box door, push fit, you'll feel it go into place. If it won't go, then the chances are you've got it in at an angle. And that really is one of the easiest DCC fits that I have done. For the DCC Concepts Zen Next 18 decoder, we're going to see if we have enough room to fit a stay alive. So I'm just going to separate the tender from the locomotive again, and then very carefully prise back open the smoke box door. You can see how easy this method is. Use the other end of the tool, grab into that daughter board, just pull it free. And what I'm going to do is just very carefully remove that decoder, and then we can add the Zen decoder. Again, gently push until you feel a click. Now what we've got is the space. Let's just see, we need to put the control board for the plug and play stay alive in. I'm going to pre-plug all of this together, so just put that on there. And just for this test fit, I'm going to fit the smallest of the stay alive capacitors, because I don't honestly think that this locomotive really needs it. It's got pickup across a lot of different wheels. But we're just going to very carefully put this into place, feel it go into place. And this is the trickier bit. Just going to carefully, actually that goes in very, very easily. I'm going to place the actual capacitor at the top. Let's just see if we can neaten up some of this wiring and actually use the tool just to feed that in there. Because what we don't want is a kind of a tension that will push back against the smoke box door. And then the single supercapacitor, just trying to use its blunt edge to push some of this wiring back. You can see actually there is a reasonable amount of space. I don't think you could fit the next size up of these capacitors, but there is definitely the room in there to add solder-free plug and play, one of the DCC Concepts stay alives, and then just very, very carefully add back in that push fit smoke box door. And there you have it, fitted with the Zen Blue Plus decoder, complete with the solder-free plug and play stay alive. When it comes to running qualities, actually I was very, very impressed. I tested this locomotive on what's actually quite a long train that, in all honesty, most steam locomotives in my fleet would not be able to manage, and yet it just romped away with it with zero wheel spin. Now I put that down obviously to the rubber traction tyres, and I know that that is an area that people were complaining about when it was announced that this model was going to have those traction tyres, but I don't think it's compromised it at all. If you weren't told in advance that it had traction tyres, just to look at it, you can't really tell. And in terms of performance, I'm not seeing any great issues whatsoever on the track. The electrical continuity and pickup is not compromised at all, and really it just didn't seem to be bothered even by intel frog points or dirty track. And whilst some of that could be put down to that small tiny stay alive, the fact that we've got enough wheels on the track means that actually this locomotive really does perform quite well. The fact that it could move that train up and down gradients and through complex point work with no issues is a great point. The only area on the running which for me was a little bit of a detraction was when it's running downhill. It does seem to surge a little bit like locomotive, and I could briefly see that when I had it on a 5% downward grade. It did seem to surge stop. But that is possibly something that can be addressed with the back EMF settings in the CVs, but habitually this is something which doesn't normally need changing with the Rails Connect decoders or the Zen decoders, so it was a little bit of a worry to see it rear its head, although I feel that if I had chance to leave this locomotive to run in on the rollers or on the layout for an hour or so, then I think that a lot of those tiny issues would go away. The dragging pickups on the tender actually weren't a great issue, and I suppose in part the huge amounts of traction with the traction tyres meant that they just weren't a bother. I really do like that innovative drawbar, and it kept the locomotive and tender really close, but actually it's really strong because that long train didn't show any tendency to pull the locomotive and tender apart. On the really tight corners, radius 1, I did notice that whilst the locomotive would get round them, the front pickup wheels would tend to reach the running plate there and stick and sort of slide round, but it didn't derail, and actually you really wouldn't be advised to run it on radii down to radius 1, but it will kind of do it. In all other areas of running, it really did excel itself. When it comes to the spare set of wheels, I haven't actually tried fitting these. I look at them and think that's going to be a little bit of a fiddly job, and I really don't want to go there. My feelings are that the locomotive is certainly not compromised by having traction tyres fitted. In fact, I think it makes it an absolutely amazing performer. Dapol have added these, I guess, because the usual vocal minority have been making a lot of loud noises about traction tyres online. But I personally think that maybe Dapol have made a rod for their own backs in providing these. The people who complain the most were never going to buy it. They're just looking for excuses not to. But when I look at this model, there is no excuse not to buy this. It really is a great piece of engineering, and I'm really glad to be able to add it to my fleet. So we come now to the scores. First up is build quality. It's a shame in a way that there were a couple of areas where I felt that Dapol had kind of dropped the ball a little bit. The little air gap around the base of the chimney was one area that really did disappoint me somewhat. I did feel that when you're paying nearly £200 for the base locomotive, little areas like that, you really need to get them just right. The little splatters of gold paint, whilst I can deal with that, I shouldn't really have to. And those rear buffers, just a little bit of glue would have fixed that and saved a lot of issues. And I've seen online that I'm not the only person to have suffered with these. It does seem to be a common problem. But that said, it's an easy fix. They were there in the box and no real harm done. So on build quality, I'm going to give this an 8.0. On running qualities, as I said before, this really did excel. So in all honesty, the traction tyres for me have proved a winner. I think if it had been supplied without them, there is no way in model form that a 440 type wheel arrangement model locomotive is really going to stand up to what the prototype could have done, and I think that this was the most sensible move. The only area really where I had any kind of concern was that slight hunting when it was running downhill on a gradient. So all in all, quite pleased with the performance, and I'm going to give this a 9.1. On DCC fitting and innovation, that really is where this model excels itself. The connection between the locomotive and tender is an amazing idea, and really, when you look at its simplicity yet effectiveness, you think, why has nobody done this before? It is so much better than what the other manufacturers have been doing. That alone really stood out for me. But the model didn't stop there. We also had that really easy decoder fitting through the smoke box door. And there is actually quite a reasonable amount of space in there, such that I was able to, within a minute or so, fit a stay alive with no problems whatsoever. There's also space for that speaker in there with the solder-free connections. And I know that solder is almost like some kind of witchcraft to a lot of people, and they wither away from any notion that you're going to have to solder something, which is why I like that solder-free press contact that the speaker would have to make contact with the PCB and just work. The fact that there's also space in the tender for another speaker is really great thinking by Dapol. I also like that firebox glow flicker effect. On the F0 function on the DCC controller, it was subtle, but actually, I read online of a few people saying that it was far too dim. I didn't get that with this example. I felt it was just right. All in all, this adds up to a fully featured model with some really great innovation, and I'm going to have no hesitation to give it 10 out of 10. On accuracy and quality of finish, they really have followed the prototype well, and I really like what they've done. The close coupling of the tender to locomotive with that innovative drawbar setting actually really does go a long way to match these two together and remove the quite large gaps that we've sometimes seen from other manufacturers. So all in all, I'm going to give this a 9.9. When it comes to value for money, it is an expensive locomotive, but we are firmly now living in the realms of the £200 plus locomotive. Dapol and Rails aren't the only ones to be reaching that kind of heights, and that is where the market is going. We're seeing even main range locomotives from quite a few of the other manufacturers top that £200 mark, even before you start getting into the realms of DCC fitted and sound, and I'm afraid that's what we're going to have to expect. That is just what these things cost. So I'm going to give this a 9.1. And that gives us an overall score of 46.1. It really is a great model, and I'm really pleased to be able to add this to my fleet. And I'm really looking forward to some of the other models that are forthcoming, not just from Dapol, but Rails as well, such as that Caledonian 812. And when it comes to Dapol as well, I'm really excited to see what they've got cooking up with that 262-61XX large prairie. If it's even half the model that this is, it's still going to be something really special, and I really do look forward to being able to review that in the future. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that video, and it was just great to finally get this model. That we've been following this since that announcement at the National Railway Museum. We had a great day there, and it's so nice to finally see that model go all the way through to on the shelves, and they really are flying off the shelves. So if you do like what you see today, don't forget you need to get that order in quickly. We've got the affiliate link down below to Rails of Sheffield, but some of the liveries are selling out really quick, so do not delay. And for that DCC fitting guide, we've also got a link for the Rails Connect Next 18 decoder. But until next time, you can follow us over on Patreon and help us to make the videos that you want to see. And tickle the like button, share this video, and also, if you haven't already done so, do consider subscribing to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you then. Happy modelling. Bye for now. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMR-ish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, and NI Railways 4000 class. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.